Hi, my name's Tom, and this is my first video on this channel, Swordplay Games. And I thought a good way to start would be to showcase the HeroQuest prototype insert that I've been building. Now, this is something that I wasn't initially thinking I would be doing this way, but like many of you who received this HeroQuest box through the post, we found that the packaging wasn't ideal, unfortunately. The figures were just gripped far too tightly, and when taking figures out of those inserts, I found that some of the actual figures bent to the point where you could actually see whitened plastic. So it's annoying. I'm having to at some point put my figures into hot water just to sort of straighten them back out again and things like that. But generally speaking, it's a good solution to get the game to you with all the figures intact, but then once you've got them out, there's no way you're going to want to put them back in, well, especially if you're going to be painting them, because they'll just get damaged. So one of the things I thought when it arrived is I wanted to create an insert that would basically allow you to keep all of the figures from the Mythic tier and all the extras in the main core game box. Now, there's been a couple of people out there that have just done it by keeping the expansion boxes, so Return of the Witch Lord, etc., Colours Keep, and just using those as internal storage for some of the things. But one of the things I did like about the packaging is the fact that they had those sleeves, because it had the artwork on from the front and thought it actually looked quite nice. So I thought, well, if I'm going to make an insert, it'd be nice to have an insert that allows me to still use those sleeves. And the other thing as well is the exclusive things about the Mythic tier box, which included the dragon and the other hero characters and the alternates. So I thought actually it'd be nice to use that as an internal solution as well, to keep the Mythic tier stuff in that box. Otherwise it would just be going in a cardboard box and up in the loft. Now, the way that this has been built, technically you don't have to use any of the inserts or boxes at all, and you can see that for yourself, but I just wanted to keep those hero boxes that had the 4 female versions of the heroes in, and then obviously the main box. I wanted to keep all of that because I thought it'd be good to just have it all together. But yeah, as you can see with the lid down, it's marginally above where it should be. It's not much, only a handful of millimeters. Personally, doesn't bother me, but if you're conscious of putting games on top of it, you'll be putting pressure directly onto each of the inner boxes there, as opposed to just the outer core box. So that's just something to bear in mind. But the way that I've built these boxes, they're all fairly sturdy. You know, a little bit of weight shouldn't do any damage to it at all. So yeah, so here's just really a basic walkthrough. So what I'm going to do is obviously open it up, go through bits and pieces as we come to it, and then just show you or explain to you what I've done. Now I did initially start this project with the idea of photographing everything and then being able to have a really good explainer as to how you can build it yourself, but as I started it, it started to get more complicated. Initially I thought, you know, just put the figures out, lay them out, get a rough idea of which figures will go where, and start to build and measure and things like that, which all went according to plan. But then there were certain things like to get all of the main figures, so this is all the main baddie figures, skeletons, etc., in one of those sleeve boxes. If they were all in their own separate compartment, they wouldn't have all fitted in, and that's purely because some of the weapons just extend out a little bit wider, some of the characters are quite a bit bigger. So in some cases I ended up having to put the 2 figures in one area, and with the rest of it you have this divider between the figures that prevent them from rolling onto each other, but allows you to have the weapons still overlap, and that way I could get all the main baddie figures in that sleeve. And because of the nature of it being so specific to the types of figures, and there's a little bit of felt that I've used to sort of soften the ground, the measurements went out a little bit and became a little bit tighter than I really wanted it to be. So me calling it a prototype is really just saying that this is just my first solution, and my plan is to certainly move on to another version of this. But yes, so there was a lot of photos in the hope that it would give you a better idea, but as I said, it just seemed to become a little bit more problem solving as I went, and harder to keep photos for. And I would say from a skill level point of view, the amount of crafting went up as I went along. So initially the first box I did was the one with the rules in, so you've got the card compartments there, the token compartments, the dice compartments, and then the rule books and the big tiles. And that was quite a simple one, you know, fairly simple in the sense that I'm using foam core there to build the box, and then I'm using just paper card to cover over where the foam is on the top, just to give it a nice and neat finish. So it's really just PVA glue holding that together. That was a lot more simple, but then as I got into the figures and then trying to create something that fitted everything, it became really complicated. So at the end of this process anyway, I have a product that works really well for me, but it's certainly not something that people would just be able to pick up and do easily. If you're good at crafts and everything else, I'm sure that won't be a problem, but for the general person it's fairly complicated. So my hope is to create a prototype version 2, or I might end up just going into a finished product. So I'll just have to wait and see how it goes. But essentially I just wanted to show this off to say it can be done really. For many of us, especially when it comes to painting, there's a desire to not have them bash against each other, and unless you're going to use some other additional external storage boxes, which is fine, but obviously it just takes up more space, it's better if possible to get it all into that one box. So yeah, so when it came to the interior box, the Mythic Tier box, that one was slightly trickier because of the height of the dragon. So the dragon would only have fitted in that anyway, wouldn't have fitted in the sleeves. But that height of the dragon just protrudes a little bit higher than I wanted it to, as far as trying to be able to rest the screen on it without having the pressure of the figures underneath on top of that card indenting it. So I needed it to sit flush. So all of the bits of furniture have been moved around in a way so that none of the little plastic bits are going to create any indentation into the actual screen. Now the only thing that's actually touching the screen is the fireplace. So where the fireplace is laid on its back, the cobblestones at the front are sort of tucking into the inner box to the lower level, just to allow it to sit flush. So it does sit flush on that, but it's not to a point where it's going to create a lot of pressure on it, if that makes sense. So anyway, so that's got all of those fitted in. So with the dragon in there, the new abomination characters were quite tricky because these were the ones with the big protruding spears and they're very spiky. I found I couldn't get those into the main villain box because they just took up too much space, and they needed something with a little bit more depth to it. So it just made sense to put it in the Mythic Tier box. And what I did is I just made those dividers tighter together, and by alternating them upright and upside down, the spears can overlap into each area. But again, because they are in those sort of, they're not full height, if you like, compartments, because they're only just a couple of, about 1.5 centimeters, I think, but because they're not that big, they can allow the weapons to sort of overlap without them rattling around, and I found that was a pretty good solution. Now there's certain things there that I haven't finished yet. So for example, when it comes to painting, skulls and rats will end up going onto the bookshelves. So where the bookshelves are underneath, they'll end up being rotated so they're facing each other, so that your skull or your rat on either end are just touching, and it would still allow for the space for the fireplace to come through. So there's certain things there that are unfinished. The doors are very, very tight on the furniture as well, so the smaller amount of doors, that's nice and loose, so there wouldn't be any scratching, if you like, of any paint, but the other one is absolutely tight. So I would imagine all the way up until the last one there's no issue of paint scratching, but if you put that last one in, the chances are that one and the one it touches may end up taking the paint off. You could get some varnish on these things to prevent that from happening, but the alternative idea would be that you could just take that door and put it in another compartment. There are little areas with space which would allow that, and then you could have the doors with just that rattling around. And there's a funny number of doors. I think what is it, 21 or 23? So that's the reason, basically, is that one extra door. But that's always been the issue with HeroQuest. It's always like that odd one, that odd number. But yeah, apart from that, that's all good. The chests are all stacked up on each other with the chair, so that's the only other place where it may be a little bit more scratchy scuffing going on. But again, you know, it's possible to lay that somewhere else. You could just put a bit of soft cloth in there and then just lay the chests over the abominations or different things. So there are solutions around it if you wanted to really make sure nothing got scuffed. But essentially, in this box set, you could move things around, but in the main villain box, there's not really much option but what's available there. I did have the compartment for the heroes. So yeah, so when you get to the lower level, you've got all the heroes there facing you, which I thought was kind of cool, having them all together. And what I've done is I've allowed for 2 extra spaces there, which is for the Knights expansion pack. So I've ordered that. So I'm waiting for that to arrive before I do the final gluing on that last section, just because I need to make sure there's enough space for those 2 characters. And if not, then I'd swap possibly the wizard over and put the wizard in there instead and put the knight, you know, so there is a little bit of swapping around. What I'm really trying to do is I'm just trying to make sure that the plastic weapons aren't protruding to a point where they're going to scratch or damage the board that would sit on top, and thankfully the board just manages to avoid all of that. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the solution. It's taken me quite a while to go through. Apologise for not having any nice diagrams or any nice sort of measurements for you to give you a better idea of what you could do. I'm using foam core and the measurements are of the internal sleeves, and like I say, the dividers are about 1.5 centimeters and covered in felt. So that's just sticky back felt, which was in a craft shop locally to me. You could use other things, so like there's some velvet, sticky back velvety sheets, you could use those, equally would give softer protection. The reason I used the felt was just because it was a little bit more bouncy, added an additional amount of friction to stop the figures rolling around. What I have found with some of the spikier characters, they do get caught a little bit, so that's the only downside of that. But overall, I'm pretty happy with it. It's really good. So for me, the next phase, I think, is I'm probably going to enjoy Christmas at least to start with, but then I'll come back to some digital version of it, looking at where there's room for improvement. There are certain things I would love to have been able to do. I would love to have got the board into one of the sleeves. So if I could have found a way of building a way of having that board in the system somehow, so that you didn't have any protrusion, that would be great. I don't know if that's possible. I'd have to sort of go through, but it would probably limit me to what figures would ever be able to go in there. It might even just end up being furniture, because it's possibly some of the furniture might work with it. But again, it may not even be feasible. But I want to do that just to sort of flesh that out a little bit, and then obviously look at different materials and things that could be used to sort of create a better sleeve. One of the things I thought was kind of cool is I wanted to create little additional compartments. So like in the area where the dice is, there is that little space, and at the moment I've just got the rubber and the pencil sharpener in there because I've got a bunch of IKEA pencils in my 1980s HeroQuest, and I'm going to transfer them into here, some of them, because I've got loads of them, and I thought it'd be quite nice to have a little area dedicated for little rubber, a little pencil sharpener, and obviously the pencils can go in then with the score sheet. So that was kind of a nice little extra, and it's also quite possible that with the 2 knights there may still be a little extra space, and with that, who knows what I might create. I'm thinking there's a few bespoke ideas that I've got relating to HeroQuest, so it'd be interesting to see what that might be. So I wanted to just do this as my first video. It's really just to show you that there is possible ways of doing this. It's just a foam core insert, but it's a prototype, it's not a final version. It's something that I'm hoping to improve on and share with you as I do. I'm not expecting any of that to be really quick, by the way, just so you know. It took me such a long time. I live a very busy life. I'm a family man with kids. I'm a self-employed person, so often my time is very, very stretched. So having some downtime to do this, I was quite lucky. But once I get another opportunity, I'll be re-looking at this again, either building a second prototype or moving on to a final version. So we just have to see how that goes. So yeah, so this is swordplay.games. There's a holding website because nothing's quite ready. The logo itself is just a quick one that's been thrown together, so that's even a prototype logo, if you like, and obviously this insert's all prototype. But I thought it'd be quite a fun video for the first one for the channel, and a good way to just introduce myself. The plan is that this is going to have a variety of board game content once it's in full swing, probably a little way from that, but some of that will be creative projects like this, things that you can do and try. So thank you for listening and enjoy HeroQuest. Take care.